we chatted Friday about a couple of new ways of doing the square roots here. Thank you. So, sure. So we are going to be taking a peek today in page 3. There are some examples done completely up above, which is one of the reasons I swiped this one. I'm like, hey, we get built-in examples too. That's kind of nice. So solve the equation by taking square roots. Show the steps. So again, just like we were doing before on Friday, and again, we're over on page 3, make sure your x squared term is alone first. So that's one thing I didn't have a lot of on this particular sheet over on page 3. So we're going to get the x squared term by itself first. I guess I could do this. Yeah, we're rocking and rolling. No, because I'm concerned that if we start with the test, I'm going to have some people that are going to take the whole period, then we get nothing done. So we're going to get something started, and then we'll get that set. And so when we're rolling here, again, x squared's not alone yet. So I've got to make sure that gets done. And so once we finally get to a point where x squared is by itself, that's when we're ready to do the square root part, because that's how we get rid of the squared. But you also have got to remember, with any quadratic, which just means it's x squared, we're going to have two answers. So I think we know what the square root of 1 is. I don't think we're going to have to be too concerned here and get a solution. The only twist I can see coming on this page, at least from what I was looking at before, let's say we go down to one like 15. Now it looks a lot like the one we just did. Here's the one difference. So I start to work through, and I got to get the 3 out, because again, x squared's got to be completely alone before I can do my square root. Can't even do it yet, because I still got that 100 with it that I'm multiplying by. So we get that out of there. Now this is when life gets interesting, because you're like, wait a minute. We can do this with a fraction? We can. How you want to put your answer is going to be the part that gets interesting here. So let me explain. If I do each of these separately, if I do the square root of 4, I get 2. If I do the square root of 100, I get 10. I have no problem with you writing your answer that way. Now, if you don't think of that, because either when we were going through you were kind of in a different world or something, here's the other thing I could do. I can do second and x squared to get my square root, and just type the fraction in right away. And I can write it as a decimal. But again, I still got to do the plus minus thing. These are the same thing. I'm perfectly content with either. So that's going to be your call on how you want to go about doing that. But again, these all are going to work that similar way. Subtract, divide to get your x squared alone, and then take it from there. And there's an example above that on each section too. So this whole front page, page 3, runs on those same 2 steps in the first examples that we had from Friday. On the back, though, it changes up a little bit. We are going to skip number 21 because something funky happened there, and we don't need funky right now. Don't need funky. And so these are going to be like the ones that we were dealing with on the right side of the notes from Friday. And again, I'll get these up and posted in case you need those. So if I'm doing, let's say, number 19, okay, job number 1. got to get the parentheses alone. So whatever's being done to them, in this case it's minusing 6. We need to get that out of there. Once that parenthesis is alone, and it is now, we're going to square root both sides. So we get that out. Now, if I know what the square root of 49 is already, because it's a perfect square, that's cool. If I'm not sure, again, second and x squared, there's my square root. And once we're rid of the radical, we need two answers. So, like what we did on Friday, we're going to break it into two equations. And I do have extra paper in the packet if you need scratch work. I apologize that I didn't space these out a little better. But we're going to have one equation where it's equal to positive 7. And one equation where it's equal to negative 7. Because again, we got two answers. So you know what? Since Hardy had a little bit of an issue here with the spacing, even though I know I gave you some scratch paper, even if you were doing every other one and got 4 of these done on each side, that'd be pretty good, actually. And so we get those set. And the only other thing I would say, for instance, as you're working through these, is if you run into one, let's say like 25, I'm going to move it down just a little bit, then we'll get everything back out to you. This will give you one of everything. That way we're sure we're not. So any plussing or minusing always comes first. Kind of keep this here to help us if we need it. Now this time, I'm not ready after the first step to go already because I've still got a number over here in front of my radical, sort of like we did on this one on the example. So we're going to divide by 2, like we did divide by 5 over here. Both sides, still an equation. And now we're ready to do our square root step because this is completely isolated. And again, if you're not sure on the radical, and if sometime even you do the radical and you get a decimal, we saw that Friday. It's okay, we can do decimals. No decimal this time though, the square root of 25 is 5. And so now all I got left is to make my two equations. One with a positive 5 and one with a negative 5. Add my 1 over, add my 1 over. So that's just, again, a quick review of Fridays. If you weren't here Friday, you're going to want to watch that lesson or at least go to Classroom and copy those notes down as we're getting set with this stuff. But again, when you're done with the quiz, if you were done already, that's cool. If not, you've got time to do that. But work on these on pages 3 and 4 once you've got that done.